This program is brought to you by Community Trust Bank, Medical City, Bid Select, and the Neely School of Business at TCU. Welcome to Platforms, the life-lifting news program for women. Now, here's your host, Shivaun Palmer.
Welcome back, everybody, to Platforms, a life-lifting news program for women. Continue our conversation today with Cindy Brinkley. She's with senior exec with AT&T, and we've had a great conversation today. Cindy, an area that a lot of people are interested in, the buzzwords these days in corporations, is diversity, commitment to diversity. So why don't you define for the audience that term as it applies to AT&T and how your company is involved with that?
Sure. Well, first of all, how we look at it, diversity is certainly ethnicity and gender and those type things, but it's really a much bigger picture than that. It's really about diversity of thought, diversity of maybe geographic, where you come from. It's a whole host of things, and particularly at AT&T, it's really diversity of culture, because AT&T is a company that's been kind of a collection of companies, if you will. Right. So bringing in all of these different individuals from the different companies and seeing how well they all kind of fit together. And also within our company, there's the wireline wireless too.
Now, what is that wireline
well,
wireless?
Those who have most of their experience on the wireline side of the business versus those who have had most of their experience on the wireless side of the business. So getting those two to really leverage and to make the whole AT&T a lot stronger. So it's a much bigger picture, and so what we really like to think of it is that you have a culture that really brings out the best in people, and that you end up with a much better product if you have everybody participating, right, and not just one way of looking at things or not just one way of addressing things. And so by having all the different players come together, use their own perspective, and get to a finished product, I think it makes you stronger in the long run. It's certainly been the case with AT&T, and something that we consider to be one of our best practices, quite honestly.
You brought up a great point, because many of us have worked for companies where they had not one but several mergers.
Right.
And so when you bring in these people together, it's like throwing a step family together for the first time. They came from very different cultures. They're much more comfortable on their team. So that causes a lot of anxiety, and you have to address that.
Well, when you think about it, most mergers fail, and a lot of times it's because of the cultural aspects, right? You just can't get to those synergies. You just can't cross that threshold. Right. And so, we've had several of these mergers, and I think that's something that, we're not perfect by any shape or form, and we continue to have our challenges, but I think it's something that we've done very well and continue to do. And what we really try to do is kind of take the best practices and to kind of say, okay, we're going to take this from this company, this from that company, and really try to create your own culture. And so, not to say that there's not those who mourn for days of yore, so to speak, but it is an opportunity to move forward. So,
right, it's in 2010, I think a lot of dynamics with corporations now, where years ago employees would be asked to vent any they were disgruntled, they'd be very hesitant to go to management and share any disappointments or any challenges. But I think these days companies are trying to get more of that information to kind of diffuse or try to curtail any potential problems.
Yeah, I think the buzzword now is all about employee engagement.
Okay.
And so, what's been shown is that if you have an engaged employee, that's going to really increase your bottom line, because an engaged employee is a happy employee, which makes for happy customer interaction. Yeah. And so getting that level of employee engagement in a time, quite honestly, when kind of the social compact's been broken, more or less, right? I mean, used to, you'd come to work for a company and you might be there for 30 years, and that may not always be the case then. So now designing a culture such that you can get a high level of engagement from an employee, and they in turn can get what's important to them, and make it be a real win-win situation. So that's what you really try to achieve.
I know in the last segment we're going to talk about the multi-generational task force. I can't wait for that conversation. But a lot of the young people graduating today and going into the workforce, they really are looking for a much more balanced work-life balance for themselves and their families. So I presume this is an issue that AT&T is aware of and that you're trying to address for your workforce?
Yes, it is very much so. It is most definitely a different generation coming in. It's not a bad thing. I don't mean to imply that it is. It's just different, and as such, you have to manage the workplace differently. You have to probably communicate a little differently, have different tools, have a lot of things in place that you might not always have had. And you do that in an environment where you've got a lot of different generations all working there together.
Yeah, and that brings up a whole other set of
That's
issues.
right, yeah.
You know, earlier in the piece we talked that AT&T has over 200,000 employees worldwide, which is remarkable. Mm-hmm. And obviously you're in countries all over the world. So how do you address the cultural differences where you have employees maybe in India or China mm-hmm. versus the U.S.? So how do you keep such a large workforce integrated and connected as best you can? Because there's so many different cultural aspects to it.
Well, you know, that continues to be something that we work on every day. We're a technology company, and so having the technology tools to let people connect is one way to make that happen. Being sensitive and in tune with the fact that, you know, they're on a different time zone, in fact, and may have a completely different culture. Maybe it's the holiday that they're celebrating. So trying to be cognizant of those things, and that's, when we spoke earlier, Shivaun, about the skill set for the future, right. One thing I think is really important is this cultural competency. You know, can you work across various cultures, and can you bring out the best in people, knowing that they may come from a completely different background than you, celebrate totally different holidays, mm-hmm. and how do you work together in an effective way? So it continues to be something that we continue to work on. But, you know, technology helps, and the fact that people are very much in tune with that, I think, goes a long way, too.
That's great. Cindy, hold that thought. We're going to go to break, and we're going to grab you for one more segment. This has been fascinating. Folks, I'm here with Cindy Brinkley. She's the Senior Vice President for Talent Development and Chief Diversity Officer at AT&T. We'll be back in a moment.